Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and a very warm welcome to Learning from Karbala on Hidayat TV, which is broadcast to over 160 countries worldwide. My name is NASRIN KAZMI, and today we're continuing our series on learning from Karbala. Last week we were talking about some of the political and moral lessons that we take from Karbala, and today we're going to be concentrating on the social lessons. Joining me is Sister AYMAN HIRJI as ever. So inshallah we're going to continue where we left off really, when we were talking last week about some of the political lessons and also the moral lessons that we take from Karbala, but with the lessons of Karbala, which are multi-layered and multifaceted, it's very difficult for us to separate them because they do sort of permeate into our lives in so many ways. But if we concentrate on social responsibilities for a moment, if we look at, I remember the last thing we were talking about is the relationship with the individuals within the camp of Imam Hussein Islam, particularly his family. So if we can maybe talk a little bit about the family structure and how everybody looked towards Imam Hussein Islam, the relationships that were going on between, you know, the brother and sister, the parent-child relationship, the uncle, nephew. So if we can maybe talk about how that those relationships help us to understand how we should conduct ourselves in the homes and in the families.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. When we look at Karbala, it's relationships that have already formed beforehand and are nurtured beforehand according to the principles of Islam and the morals of religion. And we see the reflections on the day of Ashura and the time that they spend in Karbala, the camp of Imam Hussein. And you see already on the way to Karbala, and we talked about the different interactions that father and son have, or Imam Hussein has with his companions on the way.
Yeah.
And we have that understanding that there was, at every point, Imam Hussein stood down and spoke to the people around and explained to them where he was going, what he was doing. We see that the women are protected, so to speak, and they're kept secure and safe. And the men take on this responsibility to keep them safe, to assist them in whatever way they can. And they make sure that the women are looked after at every point in the journey. The women and children are looked after. When you come into the days that they spend in Karbala, then you see this intense relation. The relationships become intense now, sort of because of the time, space. Now we see all this intensity of emotion and intense and the feelings all coming together now in a way that magnifies that relationship even more.
Yeah.
Especially when you see the relationship between, for example, Kulthum and Hazrat Abbas, for example. On the night of Ashura, they say that she had no children to her name, and Hazrat Abbas said, I will be sacrificed in your name tomorrow. And that brother-sister relationship of understanding and consolation and knowing to be there for your sister. For the brother and sister relationship, you see Imam Hussein and Bibi Zainab very intimate in terms of their understanding and their bond based on Allah, and their discussions centering around this. And she comes, when she sees the armies increasing, she gets anxious and she comes to Imam Hussein and she says to him, you know, the armies are increasing, do you have no one else to call? Do you have no one else to come to your help? Brother, how many are we? How many there are? And he consoles her and he comforts her and he says, you know, we rely on Allah and we trust in Him and we are on haqq and we must have patience, Zainab. And so you see this exchange between them. And even when they pray together. So there's no division.
It's a common goal.
Yeah, even the setup of the tents is such that the women are put in the middle and the men's tents are around. And then they dig a trench around and they fill it with firewood, and they light it so that the enemy do not approach their tents or their children and their women whilst they're alive. And at one point during the battle, on the day of Ashura, Imam Hussein manages to get to the river, and he puts his hands into the water and he looks at the water and he hears a cry, attack his tents. And he rushes towards the tents and he says, not whilst I'm alive will anyone cast a glance upon these women and children and attempt to attack them or hurt them. And you also see before the farewell between between Imam Hussein and Bibi Zainab. When he's leaving, she's following him, and she tells him, go slowly, my brother. Then she says, wait. Then she tells him, turn back, my brother, I have something to give you. And she reminds him of the amanat she has from her mother, Lady Zahra alayha salam, and she kisses his neck. So you can imagine the intensity of emotion that is playing between these. He tells her very openly, Zainab, bring me the oldest pair of clothes you can find so that I can put it on under my garments, because these people are not going to leave anything on my body.
Yeah.
And then you see his departure with Sakina, his daughter, his 4-year-old daughter, who, when his relationship with her is so close. It's so beautiful, it's so real. And this can be between our fathers and daughters. It's not something that we should just leave to remain in Karbala and not emulate. And it reminds you, or brings back the visions or the images of the relationship between Rasulullah and Lady Zahra alayha salam, when she's very young, and when she sees Rasulullah returning home, bleeding from head to toe, you know, when he was struck by the Meccan disbelievers, and he was bleeding.
She used to clean him,
and she used to wipe his face, and she used to kiss his face, and she used to console him, and she used to look after him at a very young and tender age. She was doing this, and you see this relationship between Bibi Sakina and Imam Hussein, where she says to him, wait, father, don't go yet. I don't want you to go, because everyone who's gone hasn't come back. And so, you know, and he sits on the floor. He acknowledges that she's a young child and she needs to be spoken to, and he comes down to her level. He sits on the sand. He takes her in his lap. He holds her. He cuddles her. He comforts her. She falls asleep in his lap. So these are things we have. These relationships and these emotions are real. We experience these in our families, in our daily occurrences, in our daily interactions. And you see that she says to him, okay, father, you can go. I saw my grandfather. And he said, let Hussein come to me. And you know, she hugs him and she kisses him and she goes. But on the day after he's martyred, she weeps and she turns towards the man who's there, who's recording these events, and she says, show me the way to Najaf. He says, why do you want to go to Najaf? She goes, I want to go to my grandfather. I want to tell him of what has happened to us. And so even in this time, I want to complain to him, I want to tell him. And then you see the relationship between Bibi Zainab alayha salam and Imam Sajjad. Imam Hussein says, come with me. And the women in the camp are tending to Imam Sajjad while he's unwell. And he says, come with me while I say my farewell to my son. And Imam Hussein goes in with Bibi Zainab, and he tries to stand up, and Bibi Zainab is supporting him. He can't stand even on his own. And he says, father, how can you go while I'm still alive? And he says, no, you're the Hujjah of Allah. So even that intensity between father and son, when Imam Hussein sees the last of his son Ali Akbar, they say that he feels like he's lost everything in the world. And it's only a father who knows the separation between when he has to see the death of his son, and he has to take out a spear from his chest or from his liver, whichever was according to history. But you see the relationship that he sends his son first. He says, before anyone from the Hashemites goes, my son, you will go first. No one will precede you. And then you see this amazing relationship between Imam Hussein and Hazrat Abbas. The one who never calls his brother by his name, always calls him Mawla. The one who constantly from morning goes back and forth to the tents. Imam Hussein says, go and tell Umar Asad this, go and say this, go and do that. He is constantly listening. And he says to him, please give me permission. Throughout the day he says to him, please, throughout the morning, give me permission. He says, Abbas, if you go, there will be no morale left for this camp. Everything will fall apart. And he says, okay, let me go for the children. And Imam Hussein knows very well why he's going. And he goes with a spear. He doesn't even go with a sword. And when he reaches him in his decapitated state, Hazrat Abbas turns to him, and amazingly in his last moments he says to him, when Imam Hussein puts his head on his lap, he puts Hazrat Abbas's head on his lap, he keeps shifting it off. He says, why do you do that? Because I feel for that time when you will be alone and there will be no one to do that for you. And that don't take me back, because if my sisters were to see me like this, they would be heartbroken. They will lose all hope for any supporter in this time and age. So don't take me in this state. The kids had pinned so many hopes in me, but I haven't been able to get them water.
And even at that time, he was
He
considerate.
was not thinking of himself.
Yeah.
And even once he
protecting
picked up the water in his hands when he was at the Furat, he says, not before Hussein. So to recognize the Imam, that's another relationship we definitely need to establish as part of our familial relationships. Why should Imam be so different and far away from us? We see mother and child relationships. You see Rabab and how Imam Hussein and Ali Asghar is, and the whole event of how Ali Asghar is martyred, and how he comes back to the tent, and he comes back and forth and thinking, how am I going to show this baby to the mother? How am I going to present this baby to the mother? So there's a real consideration that they're individuals here with hearts and feelings, and but everyone beyond all these feelings recognizes that Imam and Allah, that the duty to Imam is ultimately our duty to serve Allah, and that is greater than any other relations we have. And Bibi Zainab quite beautifully expresses this in that she prepares her two young children, her only children. She is the individual who has no offspring from her family anymore. Like we say, the Sayyids are family of the Imams and the AYMAN. Bibi Zainab has no offspring that continued after the Battle of Karbala. She gave up everything she had, literally everything she had. And she prepares her children, and she doesn't weep even one single tear for them, for the fact that she doesn't want her brother to feel any remorse. She doesn't want to show that she says, this is my sacrifice. This is my sacrifice for you, Hussein, because this is what I want to give in the way of Allah for you, for the truth, for the real message. And she doesn't weep for them for the entire journey. And how beautifully she takes on that role of leader and comforter and consoler. I mean, it comes from being the daughter of Lady Zahra. But having said that, it is also an example for us to follow. It is not something that we have to alienate ourselves from.
Why the story of Karbala is so universal and so relatable, and you don't have to be Muslim even for you to be able to relate to it, is because of what you've mentioned about these different relationships, the dynamics that are going on, the respect, the love, and the fact that you can relate to someone who is on your level, your age, or wherever you are in the journey of your life. So when you're younger, you could relate to Sakina and her relationship with her father, or when you're an older, a lady, you could maybe relate to Sayyidah Zainab in that position of an auntie, or when you have a child, you become a mother, then you see the relationship that's played out between the mother and Ali Asghar. So every single person can relate to it because it's very
even the
real.
Relationship of friendship, which you haven't mentioned, is
of course, the companions.
That Imam says that when he gives out all the banners, he hangs on to one banner. And everyone's vying for the banner, and everyone asks, who is this banner for? He says, this is for a special friend, and I'm waiting for him. And he sends a letter to Habib. And he says, your Hussein needs you. And Habib rushes to his aid. So that they were at a
childhood
distance.
friends.
And they were at a distance though. This is the idea of friendship, that the friendship that is in the name of Allah transcends distance, time. And if you're called for the true mission, then
you leave everything.
You leave everything. And he comes and he embraces his childhood friend, and he says, I should go. And towards the end of his life, whilst he's dying, he calls the others around him, and he says, I know I'm giving you a will, but then you're not going to live longer than me, not much longer than I have lived. But I tell you one thing, I admonish you about one thing: do not leave his side. No matter what happens, do not leave his side. Do not leave this man's side, for he's really on the haqq. And you see, even we see this. We had a slave, John, who was one of from the time of Rasulullah, Imam Ali alayhi salam, who had come alongst with them, and he was freed. He was a freed slave, and he came along with them, and he said, Master, let me give my life. He said, no. He said, let me give my life. Is it because of my race? Is it because of my color? He says, no. You are dear to me. You're one of the closest companions you were to Imam Ali alayhi salam, my father and my brother. How can I let you go? At every individual, Imam says, how can I let you go? How can I let you go? But every person makes his case and says, I will go before you. How can you call for me? Every person who came was answering the call to Imam Hussein, which he says in the end, and which the call reverberates for us for replying to Imam Zamana's message. And so John goes to fight there as well. Then those people who stand in front of him whilst prayers are offered, each one gave their sacrifice in in the manner mentioned. But all the companions were also very close to Imam Hussein. And the individuals who loved and understood Imam and who considered him worthy of that position and understood what it meant to be divinely appointed. So you can see all these different relationships that come into play on the plains of Karbala.
What I find very interesting, and again it is a question that's frequently asked about the role of the women and the children, and why Imam Hussein alayhi salam took them along with him on this journey when he knew that his fate was inevitable martyrdom. So of course, I mean, we know that history is written by the victors, and had that been the case, then Imam Hussein's sacrifice could have been in vain. Nobody would have known about it, no one would have heard about it. So one of the roles that the pivotal roles, which is fundamental to this, that Sayyidah Zainab plays, is that she recounts this story and the true events.
Actually, we don't hear of her sermons as well, but she speaks in the courts as well. And so both the sisters, both the daughters of Lady Zahra, fulfill this role of Abbas and Hussein on the way to Kufa and Sham, and in the courts of Yazid and Sham, and they don't stop in the dungeons as well while they're captured in the dungeons. The people are constantly hearing of their tales through the walls of the dungeon, and they hear in the cries of the women and the children from the dungeons, and they question why are these people imprisoned, what have they done, and all these questions come up because they feel the intensity and the emotion that they have been unjustly treated.
And due to this, the khutbah in the court of Yazid, both Sayyidah Zainab and that of Imam Zain al-Abidin changes the mood in the court, whereas there were people there who were on the side of Yazid up till that point, until they heard the words of these two very eloquent individuals, and it changed their stance completely. Famously, there is either some narrations say that it was a Christian man, some say it was a Jewish man, but the narration I read that it was a Christian man who said that, is this how you treat the household of your prophet? If Jesus, our prophet, a person that we revere in our religion, if he left offspring, we would revere them, we would love them, we show them respect, and this is what you do to your prophet's household. So it shows that this shift, this change in attitude was brought on by the fact that there were the prophet's family there, Sayyidah Zainab, Sayyidah Kulthum, and of course Imam Zain al-Abidin in Islam there.
And that was very important that he took them. First of all, if we go back and we backtrack to what we were talking about, the intention was not to wage a war or have a battle. So the intention was to go for Hajj, to travel to a faraway land, and to just, not to cause any disruptions if there was nothing, but to reform at every point. Wherever he went, wherever he stopped, wherever there was support, it was to move away and move to Kufa, for example, for support there. And then Kufa became a no-go area, and they were directed towards Karbala. And even if it was anticipated, the event of Ashura is anticipated, like you said, the mention of the ladies and that they played a very pivotal role in continuing the message. And some people have looked on this negatively and said that, that he took them willingly and he took them deliberately, and that is a very negative impact on the whole mission. But the reality of the fact is that those few hours between Asr and Fajr and Asr lived to tell the whole human tale, and lived to explain to you that, okay, if there were women and children, fine. The negativity on the impact of Imam Hussein's, people tend to question it because of the presence of women and children there. What of the opposition's treatment of these women and children then? So there's this acknowledgement that women and children are sacred and need to be looked after. So what of the treatment of the women and children? So it's very important to realize that on the other side, there are individuals who are not human at all then.
Definitely.
Who are beating children up, whipping them, stealing their belongings, ripping their veils off, burning their only place that they can call home, taking them as prisoners of war. This was not how Muslims were supposed to. If we backtrack back in history, and we go back to Rasulullah's battles, if we remember the prisoners of war, nobody was allowed to lay a hand on them. Nobody was allowed to mistreat them, be rude to them, unkind to them. But instead, they were at that point supposed to teach a few people how to read and write, and that would be their ransom to be released. And never were they supposed to be mistreated. They were always to be humanly treated. No bodies were supposed to be decapitated.
Definitely.
And this is the ummah of Rasulullah who do these things.
Yeah.
So you talk of 50 years, but you make an active effort of taking yourself back to the time of Rasulullah, and the implementation of the divine laws that he brings down, the human, moral, ethical laws that he places in that society. And then you can see the decline. You can see the moral decline, and very clear.
There's another example that if you look at the war that was waged against Imam Ali alayhi salam by Lady Aisha, and the way that Imam Ali alayhi salam, the way he treated Lady Aisha when he sent her home respectably. So we see there's again a major difference here in how the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam treat others and those who treat the Ahlul Bayt. So we can see a big difference here. One of the other questions that we do get a lot, and I think it is very important for us to explain this time and time again, I think we need to continue to explain this because people continue to ask and people are curious, is why this tradition of mourning is so important in the school of thought of the Ahlul Bayt Islam, when it's so discouraged in other schools of thought. And not just the mourning ceremonies, but the eulogies and the lamenting and the matam and the gathering,
the whole azadari,
azadari, even the nohas, the poetry. Why is all of this so important in the tradition of the Ahlul Bayt Islam?
Because we as human beings are not just people who do things. We are beings. We are in a state of being constantly. We're people who feel, who experience. And that is what we go through in our lives. We experience, and we hold on to these experiences as the most dear things. And as human beings who feel and understand these things, especially a lot of things in our lives we understand through our emotions. For example, a mother's love cannot be quantified, cannot be explained, put in words, but it's felt. A love for a spouse, for the creatures of Allah, anything. If you experience anger at something that's been done wrongly, you can't quantify it, you can't place it in certain words, but yet to try and express it. How do you express it? You express it by showing signs of anger, showing your love, writing down, or positively doing something, right? So if I love somebody, I will express it with my words, or write a letter, buy a card, write some fancy words in there, and maybe buy a gift, take them out for dinner. So I'm doing all these signs to show my love for an individual. The love is contained within my heart, and Allah created us with His heart. And when we look at the whole institution of Karbala, the whole tragedy of Karbala, and the day of Ashura, and the person involved, so first of all, we must take into consideration who we're talking about. So we're not talking about mourning over our own personal gain, personal losses. So we're talking about a huge phenomenon. We're talking about the grandson of Rasulullah. We're not talking about anybody ordinary. So let's take that out of the equation completely. It's not anyone ordinary that we're mourning over. We know that we would not mourn over our dead loved ones for days on end and weep to the extent that we criticize and we complain to Allah. We know that this is a discouraged practice. And we are familiar with the hadith. We are not mourning one who Rasulullah himself hasn't mourned. So one, we are not mourning an ordinary human being. We are following the sunnah of Rasulullah. Who mourned even for his son Ibrahim when he lost. And he wept at the birth of Hussein. Lady Zahra mourned. Imam Hassan, while he was passing away, Imam Hussein was crying. And he said, brother, look what has befallen you. And he says, and Imam Hassan started to weep. He said, what has befallen me is just poison. What is going to befall you is like no other experience. No one has ever going to experience this, and no one ever will. And he said to him that very famous line, La yawmun ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like yours, O Aba Abdullah. And so that just stands out to say that there is absolutely no one who has been treated in the manner that he was. He was not an ordinary person, yet he was martyred and butchered and abused and sworn at and not given any water. Not only him, but his family, his children, and his companions. Each one of them was mistreated. There was not one who was not subjected to this torture and disgusting behavior. And then you see that we're following the Rasulullah's tradition. We are not mourning anybody ordinary. We are reviving our hearts that sometimes become dead because of our constant distance from Allah. And we revive our hearts by remembering the personalities and the awliya of Allah. And through the dhikr of Allah, our hearts are at rest. we give our hearts peace by remembering Allah, and we feel love for this person that Allah and Rasulullah himself said, I feel love for. So when we express our love, like Quran says, Rasulullah says, I ask of nothing from you. What am I asking for? I'm asking for you to love, intensely love and follow my Ahlul Bayt, my family. And what are we doing? We're following we're complying with the Quran. We're giving to Rasulullah what he has asked of us. He is asking, I'm not asking. Allah said, what do you want? Every prophet said, my ajr is with Allah, my ajr is with Allah. Rasulullah says, for the Quran, for 23 years of being amongst you, for everything that has happened, every minute I've been amongst you, all I'm asking you is to show intense love for them in a manner that you accept their leadership, you love them, you follow them, and you adhere to them. And this is not something I'm saying, the Quran is saying this. So you're doing exactly that. How do I show my love? I said, if I want to show my mother my love, my child my love, I'd express it with words, with action, and with thought, right? How am I showing my love? When I say, Labbaik Ya Hussein, that's me expressing my love for him. When I say, Ya Hussein, I feel an iota of the pain that he suffered. And so I express it by beating my chest. And I write poetry, because those are the words of my heart. Those are the words of my soul. So I write poetry. Some people draw, some people cry, some people just stand there and read, some people learn, some people visit the shrines, which is the greatest thing to be able to also, one of the greatest acts to do is to physically identify a place. Because as human beings, we need all these things to remind us and to reattach and reconnect with individuals. Okay? When we have a loved one and he passes away, what do we do with the things? We touch it, we go to his cupboard, we take his clothes, we kiss them, we smell them. They remind us of him. And we remind ourselves of Abu Abdullah, because Abu Abdullah reminds us of humanity, Abu Abdullah reminds us of Rasulullah, Abu Abdullah reminds us of adhering to the Quran and its principles, he reminds us of what's true Islam, and he reminds us of Allah. He doesn't take us to anybody else. He doesn't say, worship me. He never says, worship me. He says, look what I did. I said, whoever found Allah hasn't lost anything. But whoever's lost Allah hasn't found anything of value.
I think what people tend to forget is that by engaging in all of these practices of remembering through what you've mentioned, you know, whether it's writing poetry or doing martyrdom, it's an outpouring of emotion, showing loyalty as well to Rasulullah. It's consoling Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. It's showing that we are in solidarity with them, that we are on the side of haqq, you know, and we are against those, we oppose those.
And we say that in Ziyarat Ashura, don't we? We renew our allegiance, and we constantly say that, that I distance myself from those who are on the wrong and who hurt you and who did this to you deliberately.
Exactly.
And I attach to those who are at peace with you.
Exactly. And it's helping to keep that message alive and that connection that we have with Imam al-Islam alive as well. And the way that we do that is, like you said, everybody has their own different way. And by doing this annually, doing it, I mean, that's just a minimum. But to do it every day, whenever we remember the sacrifice of Imam Hussein al-Islam, we can take lessons from it. We can put our own lives into perspective, our own problems into perspective, and realize that nothing can be as bad as what Imam Hussein al-Islam
And there's a
had to go
hadith to
through.
that effect that says that that when you're in difficulty, or you're in trouble or sorrows, then don't cry except for the tragedy of Abu Abdullah.
Exactly.
So it allows you to think, to take a moment and think, what tragedy? What major thing has happened to me? And then on top of that, when we talk of participating in the grief, sixth Imam, one of the Aimma, sixth Imam, if I'm not mistaken, says the believers or our Shia are the ones who, our followers, Shia by Shia I mean followers, are those who grieve at our sadness and are happy at our happiness.
Precisely.
And Rasulullah said that within the hearts of the believers, with regards to the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, is a fire that burns, a heat, a passion that burns, that is never cools down. It's never put out.
And that's from the words of our Rasul, you know, that we all believe in, Rasulullah.
And this fire is to spark off positive reaction in yourself.
Exactly.
So it's important to hold on to Azadari, because Azadari is the platform. I feel it's important to hold on to it because it's the platform from which all positive action will flow. If you allow that positive action to take effect in your life. And it's very important because Bibi Zainab alayha salam and Imam Sajjad did the same thing. They used the same mediums.
Exactly.
Imam Sajjad cried for years after Karbala. Bibi Zainab did so much Azadari that she got banished from Medina. Some say to Egypt, some to Damascus. That she was asked to leave Medina. She constantly held sessions, and she constantly repeated the tragedies of Karbala, and she reminded people of the truth, and she reminded them of their moral obligations and their political and social obligations. To the extent that the people in power thought, no way, this is getting too much for us, this is too intense. That means there's a power within that. And you can see that in the bombings across the globe, right? When the processions come out, people kill because there's nothing more they can do. This is what I mean.
To stop it.
That's the maximum you can do. What are you going to do? Kill? Okay, kill. What more are you going to do? You're just going to keep doing it, and when it can keep coming.
But the fact is that we're remembering Imam Hussein al-Islam and his sacrifice today, 1400 years on, and this is testament to the fact that all of this as a dari works. It does exactly what it's meant to do, is revive the message.
And keep it alive.
Keeps it alive. And if for those people who don't truly understand, if we liken it to the rituals of even praying daily or going for Hajj or anything like this, we are following in the footsteps of the prophets, for example, with Hajj, and all of these things are following in the footsteps of, Bibi Hajj when we do say, and it helps to connect. It helps us to understand how it was, the emotions they felt and what they went through, and this is what this is as well. So inshallah, it helps us to
and there's
connect
numerous
better.
hadith on the eye that weeps for Hussein. The eye that weeps for Hussein will be the only eye that will be happy on the day of Qiyamah. Of course, we're not saying isolated of any actions. We're talking about the intensity of this tear. That this tear that comes with the recognition, even of smaller than the wing of a mosquito, will be rewarded. It'll form a barrier between you and hellfire. Why? Because that tear that falls in the love of Hussein allows you to see justice for what it is, allows you to see oppression as it is, and then stand up.
And those people who are against crying and weeping and mourning and think that you need to suppress your emotions, if we think of the year of sadness as well, that Rasulullah, it was a year of sadness. It wasn't just a few days, it wasn't 3 days. Rasulullah wept for, Abu Talib alayhi salam, and also for his wife Sayyidah Khadija alayhi salam, and for this length of time. And,
we have a hadith,
and every time that he saw her jewelry, he'd cry.
We have a hadith that says that the heavens and the earth mourn a believer for 40 days. So not only us, but everything in the heavens and the earth
exactly.
mourn a
and there's
believer
hadith that
for 40
the jinns and the angels lamented and cried, wept and mourned, and the skies, they cried for 40 days as well after Imam Hussein Islam. We'll continue this inshallah. We're running out of time, but we've got a few minutes left for me to just share some of your offerings that you've been sending to us. We've got a few pictures that I'd like to share with you. This one's beautiful. This one is by Salman Ali, mashallah.
And AYMAN.
Very nice. And I love this one with the golden dome.
Alhamdulillah.
Labaik ya Hussein. I love it when our children get involved in these things. It really shows the message is spreading.
Kanji.
And this is
Asya Kanji from London.
mashallah.
She's 9 years
Absolutely
old.
love this.
It's amazing,
Very, very nice.
mashallah.
Beautiful. So if you've got anything that you'd like to send in, any sketches, drawings, nohas, poetry, what else can we accept?
Anything you've done in the name of Imam Hussein even?
Anything. Even if you want to do a short clip of yourself reciting your own poetry or a noha, anything like that, please do send it in to us. We have another poem that we'd like to share with you as well. This one is called O Little One. O little one, O Father, why do I see you weep when you look at my little one? What has caused your smile to vanish from your lips? Your face was so lit up when you saw he came into this world already pure. Don't you see the way he turns his face from all else? How he wants no one but you to hold him in their arms? O Father, what is that you whisper to him as he sucks upon your thumb? You press him close to your chest like you have not held any other. O Father, why do you kiss his forehead and neck with such sadness? Why do you become so silent when I bring you water to quench your thirst? And, O Father, what is this soil you hold so tightly in your hand? Why is it that its fragrance causes your tears to flow like this? If you knew what I know, then you would laugh little and weep much. Quote from Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's really beautiful and really touching. MashaAllah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you very much. That was by Safraz Shah. Thank you very much for sending them in, and please keep them coming. We love reading them and they really help us as well, and like really touch our hearts. And so we'll be back again next week, and this time we're going to be talking about personal responsibilities and in terms of what we can do about Karbala and what we can learn from Karbala and how we can apply that to our own lives and taking personal responsibilities as well. Inshallah, keep watching Hidayat TV. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.